Hey everyone, IronCC here. I wanted to make a guide to help people get their foot in the door with the Zulrah fight. When I was first learning, it took me like 24 attempts before I finally got one kill. And I actually died at the same time as Zulrah, but I still got my Western Province task. But I kept at it, and now I have some semblance of an idea on how to fight this boss. So if you're like me and just want to learn how to survive Zulrah, this guide might help you out. I want to make it clear at the start of this guide that this is not a maximum efficiency guide. I am not an expert by any means, I only recently passed 75 KC, but I can reliably kill Zulrah and I understand the fight a lot more now. This guide is for all the players on the Zulrah docks who keep throwing themselves at this boss and aren't getting anywhere. So, let's get into it. First things first, I play an Iron Man account, so I don't have easy access to the best in slot gear or anything. I'm not going to assume y'all do either. For this guide, I'll be using Void Knight armor. Now, I'm using Elite Void, which is slightly better than regular Void, but you'll be fine with regular Void for now. I'm also using a Trident and a God Cape, imbued preferably. I'm not great at gear switches, so I like to keep things simple. I'm using a Crystal Bow with a Void Ranger Helm. It's just 2 items, and since there's no ammo, I don't need to bring an Ava's device. Real simple stuff here. Next, bring your best boots and amulet, and 2 rings of recoil. Now, this is how I do Zulrah, but if you don't have a crystal bow or don't want to bother with switches at all, you can get pretty similar results with magic only. I think my first 20 kills were just with a trident, and it was only a little slower than this setup. So feel free to stick to that if that's better for you. I will say though, a trident or some powered staff is important, because I'm going to show you how to do this with the Lunar Spellbook. For my inventory, I have the 2 item switches, a ranging pot, and a prayer pot. I'm also bringing a rune pouch, a teleport to get there, a home tele tab, a spare recoil ring, and a 2-dose anti-venom. I also won the lottery and happen to have an imbued heart, but you can bring a standard magic potion or other magic boost if you have it. If you don't have an anti-venom, don't worry, the rune pouch will be our answer here. Lastly, I bring a few Karambwans for combo eating and I fill the rest with sharks. The reason I'm using a trident is because I run Zulrah on the Lunar Spellbook, for one major reason. Cure Me is a very easy tool for clearing poison, and is perfect for this fight. It doesn't interrupt combat, and you can cast it twice in quick succession to clear venom. You can also cast it directly by just clicking your health orb by the minimap. I've seen very few guides that suggest this, but it's by far the best method of dealing with venom if you're strapped for inventory space and don't have an anti-venom. Okay, so we've covered gear and inventory. There's one last thing before we get to the fight, how to get there. I have 76 agility, so I take the fairy ring to BJS, that's Big Juicy Snake by the way. I also have the Lumbridge Elite Diary done, so I don't need the Lunar or Drahman staff anymore. You can replace a shark if you need to bring a staff though. For those of you without 76 agility, you can buy a Zulrah teleport, or bring some cash and teleport to Catherby and take the charter to Port Tyrus. This method will drain your run energy and it's a little costly over time. I'd suggest getting the agility as soon as possible, but the option is there. Okay. Time for the fight itself. There's a few things you need to know going in. First, Zulrah has 3 forms noted by color. Range, which is green, Mage Hybrid, which is blue, and Melee, which is red. Green and red are weak to magic attacks, and blue is weak to ranged attacks. It's important to note though, the blue phase isn't really that resistant to magic, which is why a magic only build is pretty feasible. Like I said, the green phase attacks with range, and you should pray range for this phase. The red phase is a little different because it uses a typeless attack, so prayer doesn't work here. You need to move a few spaces away to avoid the melee attack, otherwise you'll take some pretty gnarly damage and get stunned. Lastly, the blue phase is the most dangerous, because it can use magic and range attacks without warning. You should still pray mage here, but be aware that you can take heavy damage here, so stay healthy. Second, Zulrah runs on one of 4 rotations. These rotations have preset locations and attack patterns, which means that you can know ahead of time where Zulrah's going to be next, where you need to stand, and what gear to use. This might sound a little crazy, but you actually don't need to know these rotations in detail to be effective. I'm going to give you some basic tips that will apply to all rotations. You'll learn the finer details of each rotation as you get kills, but I think getting bogged down in the details at the very start of your Zulrah grind will only make things harder for you, since you have to juggle so much information. Third, Zulrah will spit poison clouds around the battlefield. This is probably one of the harder parts about this fight for newbies, because being out of position will result in a lot of damage taken. Do your best to move quickly if you get caught off guard, and remember to eat while you're moving. Lastly, Zulrah ends every rotation with an alternating pattern of attacks. This is usually called Jad phase. The biggest thing to remember on this phase is that you need to swap prayers before you see the attack. When Zulrah dips their head down, the attack has already been shot and the damage calculated. It might feel counterintuitive at first, but pray against the next attack, not the one you see flying at you. Okay, let's jump into the fight now. Here are my tips for Zulrah. When you make it to the docks, make sure to have your recoil and your magic gear equipped. Drink your potions and hop on board. Each fight starts the same way. We'll be orienting our compass to the south. Don't ask me why, but everyone does it, and it keeps directions in order, so get used to it. The first phase of every rotation is always green, so we're starting with magic. Pray Augury or Mystic Might and run to the bottom left corner. This is every opening. Remember that. Get a few hits in and be ready to change prayer. Phase 2 is where things diverge. The most important thing to know here is which rotation you're on. Like I said, the exact details aren't as important here, but knowing which of the 4 you're on will affect Jad phase. If the second form of Zulrah is red, you're on rotation 1 or 2. If it's on green or blue, you're on rotation 3 or 4. Just remember that. A quick note here is where to stand for red phases. I've marked 2 tiles on both the left and the right side where you can stand safely. When Zulrah spins their tail, move to the other tile and resume attacking. It usually hits twice before going back under. It's important to remember to change prayers ASAP. Zulrah is untargetable for a second or so when it first emerges every phase, so there's no need to try to attack it instantly. Swap prayers, then gear, and get your hits in. Otherwise, you'll be eating up to 40 damage as soon as Zulrah sees you. Next, I want to bring up lanes. Zulrah can appear in one of 4 positions, but the 2 in the middle are pretty similar. It's easy to remember the positions as left, middle, and right. A basic rule of thumb is, Zulrah cannot move from the left lane to the right, or vice versa. Zulrah will always move from the outside to the middle before moving to the other side. There is only one instance where Zulrah breaks that rule, but it applies to all other phases. Keep in mind that if it's moving from left to middle, it will likely move to the right side next, and vice versa. Whenever there's an opening in the poison clouds, you're almost always expected to move to the other side of the arena. If possible, try to stay near the top of the arch on either side to be ready to move if Zulrah spits poison clouds. Note, even though the clouds deal venom damage, they actually don't give you venom, so you don't need to clear it afterwards. Speaking of which, don't be too concerned with clearing venom as soon as possible. It starts on 6 damage and goes up 2 more every 20 seconds or so. Wait until you have an opening to clear it, like in between phases. For the most part, Zulrah swaps back and forth between green and blue every other phase, with a few reds thrown in. There are a few times that they'll be green twice in a row, but otherwise, Zulrah will never be the same color back to back. Lastly, the Jad phase is always green, and is preceded by a blue phase in the middle. If the fight has been going on for about 2 minutes, and you see blue Zulrah in the middle lane, be ready for Jad phase next. If you were on rotation 1 or 2, that was red Zulrah as the second phase, Jad phase is on the right side of the arena. It will start with range, then mage, then range, and so on. When it spits poison, either run to the left side or hang out on the bottom right. If you're on rotation 3 or 4, that was green or blue Zulrah on the second phase, then Jad phase is on the left side. This one starts on mage first, then range. You can keep your mage prayer up from the blue phase before. I know that was a lot of information, so let's recap. Every fight starts in the same corner with the same green Zulrah. Pay attention to the second color of Zulrah, since that will tell you where Jad phase is going to be. As soon as you see what color Zulrah is, change prayers and then gear appropriately. Zulrah moves from the outside to the middle and then usually back to the outside. There's a pretty easy rhythm of moving from the left to the right side of the arena and back, especially when there's an opening in the poison clouds. After the fight has gone on for about 2 minutes, keep an eye out for Jad phase, and remember which side it'll be on. It's always green on the outside, with the blue phase in the middle just before it. After the rotation finishes, it will start another rotation from the beginning, so get back in the bottom left corner and get ready to start the cycle again. My first few kills were around 3 minutes or so I started a second phase, but never had to fight Jad phase again. You can use a home teleport tab to get out after the fight, and then use a jewelry box to go to Ferox Enclave and refill your health and prayer. Leaving your POH will also clear venom and poison, which is an added bonus. If need be, you can die inside your POH and it's considered a safe death. You just get kicked outside the house, but you don't lose anything. Okay, so that's my beginner's guide to Zulrah. I hope that this information was helpful, provided enough insight to get your foot in the door. I know that this isn't a perfect guide, but I think it covers enough ground that you can learn Zulrah on your own from here. I went from dying constantly on this fight to getting 12 kills in a row, and then it just kinda clicked. I thought this boss was super hard, but now I think it's a really fun activity, and I'm looking forward to grinding for my blowpipe and magic fang. I think one of the biggest barriers to entry with this boss is just the amount of stuff you need to juggle to do it efficiently. There are plugins to tell you the rotation and phase, or visual aids that have icons way too small to recognize at a glance, all while changing prayers and 6 pieces of gear and moving around the arena every 15 seconds. It's too much all at once. I hope that with these general tips, you can find the rhythm on your own and begin to build your own strategy. Also, remember that for the first 50 kills, deaths are free. You can reclaim all your gear from the priestess on the dock for no fees, so this is your chance to take risks. Once you have a few kills under your belt and you start to get the hang of it, try to experiment a little and see what fits your style. I ran magic only for a while before I layered in a range switch. I also started off with Ceridome and Brews, but I cut those out once I could reliably survive the whole kill. I'll be uploading an extra video with several kills to show off the strats in action if you'd rather learn that way. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Let me know if this guide helped you at all. This is my first attempt at making old school content, but I'm interested in making more. Leave a comment if you'd like an Iron Man's guide to anything in particular. Subscribe if you'd like to stay up to date. Anyways, thanks again, and happy hunting.